Guess we'll kick it off on schedule at least. Welcome to the March meeting of the Internet Developer Group. If you didn't sign, if you got email from us, fine. Hi, I remember seeing you a few weeks ago. If you got email from us, fine. If you want to be on our mail list, leave your email address, please legibly written, on the sheet in the back there. We'll make sure that you get added to our list. And all you'll hear from the list is what the next meeting is and when the presentations are available on the archive site so that you can go back and look at them. Tonight's meeting should be available within a couple of days, quite honestly. We'll probably be very fast in getting it up this time. And most of the sessions now since October are available on the net and for download on a video basis. Tonight's session should be pretty interesting. With two of our guests in the back here, I heard Judy Estrin comment on the significance of content and the coming battle over copyright of content as one of the big issues coming up that will help define where technology goes. And the day after that, I heard Eric Schmidt make the same comment in a talk at Xerox PARC. So this is a very, very focused area that is going to be a defining area for where the net goes and where the internet goes and what the internet can do for individuals and people. The gentleman we have speaking tonight is now a consultant, but has been involved in many other programs. He spent over 12 years with Hughes, most of it in the satellite business, and was actually involved in trying to take Hughes into some countries. He's done design and he's done marketing, so he's had all sides of that. He later became involved with a company called iMedia up in San Francisco, and I was actually in iMedia at one time. It had some very interesting technology for sending video over RF cables and being able to manage all that more on the trunking side than on the delivery to the individual side. He's done a lot of work on the financial trade-offs in terms of the net itself. How you deliver information and how can you deliver it most cost effectively. And this sort of resulted in him becoming known and a guest panel member for the Pacific Telecommunications Council. Pacific Telecommunications Council is an association of 200 of the larger telecommunications companies in the world, but mostly around the Pacific region, Pan-Pacific region. They have a meeting every January where they bring people together and discuss the global policy issues and things. They focus more on policy. This presentation was one of many given at that meeting as a panel member in one of their sessions, and we're delighted to have him today. Reed?
Thanks, Bill. I was here for the first Internet Developers Meeting group last month, and I remember if the data was right that the audience, while it's modest in number here, and I'm sure not modest in other ways, that the number that attends these meetings over time through the internet is in 500,000 range or something like that.
That may be a little big, but it's in the tens of thousands of range. That's okay. For sure.
So I'll also say hi to those people. And I kind of imagine this almost as a sort of a C-SPAN in some respects, because this is not, I'm not Madonna up here, definitely. But you remember, C-SPAN is where things are actually happening in terms of the government making decisions. And what my background is system engineering. My first experience with the intersection of, say, technology and entertainment came when I was a student at Caltech, and I went over to Occidental College for my music classes. Alan Chapman, who's now, I think, one of the guys on KUSC, was my music theory teacher. And as I got into my music theory and composed my first piece, he said, "Burkhart, that's a good thing coming engineered out of Caltech." And but I've always had interest in the arts as well as interest in technologies. I ended up going to satellites because it seemed very interesting, broad, huge scope. And it's really the first broadband industry. And when I worked on the policy side a little bit there, we were working with regulations that dealt with what satellites could do internationally or domestically and what the rules were for working together with other parties. And what I've really realized recently that has been an item of discussion in this really hot area between Hollywood and where we are here, Silicon Valley, and I wanted to take a showing of hands of what areas are represented, but I'm willing to bet that everyone here is on the technology side. Is that right?
Right.
By a show of hands,
Right.
everybody's technology side. No exceptions to that. And so I had the great fortune in January of having some people on the policy side, specifically, you know, there were a member of Canada's Parliament and some attorneys there. So this dialogue actually can be much more interesting to have that perspective. But I brought that in the presentation, and I'd be very curious to incorporate any thoughts that you have from your greater expertise in your individual areas as topics come up that make sense. By the way, are there folks here that are mainly, or let me ask, are there people that are specifically interested in this issue with the type of work that their companies are there doing? And could I get a sense of where you're coming from? What either the categorical organization or the name of it?
Primarily involved with internet video production and media distribution.
Okay, internet video production and media distribution. So here, with this audience of tens of thousands, we're being able to distribute media to the internet. And the issue that I bring up here, I try to bring it up at a higher level than is often talked about, because there's some very basic and fundamental issues in both telecom and Hollywood that I think are well understood, but some of them are not discussed in a way that brings the picture more clear. For example, it came out last week, the most fundamental issue that I'm curious what you all have a perspective on is internet going to kill Hollywood? Is the fact that there is availability of free content because the internet provides a bypass mechanism, you know, is it going to kill Hollywood? How many people think it might? Anybody think it might? No? Okay. And then on the other standpoint, some people think that Hollywood will be key to getting broadband deployment. Okay, everybody, we have a lot of nodding heads there. Okay, so on the one hand, what we have in the policy making circles now is we have an interest in advancing broadband. Okay, people think that internet is the future and broadband is the future of the internet, so they want to advance that, and policymakers are being asked to advance that, whereas we haven't necessarily seen profits in internet already. And at the same time, in copyright saying, this is going to, the people in Hollywood are actually saying, you know, this is the death knell of our industry. This is going to kill us. And so they're asking the lawmakers to do the reverse. They're saying, you've got to nail down all the screws. They can't be able to allow, you know, the hardware and the pipes. You know, it's got to all be limited in what it can do. And so they're complete odds. And I think that's partly known, but it's not particularly discussed in the dialogue so much yet. So that's what I'm talking about. And the first thing I want to bring up is that issue of the bypass capability in terms of a security perimeter. When anyone devises some type of a distribution mechanism, it always has some ability to be seen or listened to if that's what it's intended to be done at the end. And so if at some point in time you're going to consume it with your eyes or your ears, there is a security perimeter. And outside of that security perimeter, it's in the clear. And if you can make a fairly good original reproduction, and you can transmit it over the internet, then no matter what you do with other technologies, there is a possibility, it may be inconvenient, but there is some possibility you can be circumvented. So Eisner said that just as it's possible to create these pristine images, you can make pristine copies. And Shapiro on the other side has said, you know, if we'd listened to those guys before, we wouldn't even have radio, TV, VCR, computer, email, or internet today. So this goes to the crux of the issue, and let's take a little bit more complete look at it now. So I've already introduced some of the main questions. Is Hollywood going to be able to adapt to broadband internet, or does it go away? And I would add that Hollywood has got a big challenge from the internet that we all recognize, but the broadband internet itself has perhaps got an even greater challenge, and this isn't discussed as much. I mean, Hollywood is reinventing itself. Broadband internet is inventing itself, and it isn't really on a stable platform, a stable basis yet. So I think that one of the big questions is, will broadband flourish, you know, or just eke out a meager existence? And the policies for that are probably going to be more primitively related to the policies that will be successful in Hollywood. In other words, Hollywood was created by technology. Hollywood, before Hollywood, it was a guy sitting on the back of a horse or something and going from town to town. And once you had technology and the ability to create copies or to create some intermediate transportable representation of an entertainment work, then you're able to expand your business and expand your market. And so the fundamentals of Hollywood is technology, but we don't think of Hollywood as a technological operation. We think of Hollywood as a group of industry executives that sort of hold rein on this, and that there are two substantial parts of what Hollywood is about. But from the standpoint of technology, they wouldn't exist if there weren't technology, and now technology definitely has the chance to totally reinvent the landscape for what Hollywood can do. So with respect to policy, I think it's important to ask what are our end objectives in policy. And I think it's important that, in the United States, the leading country now, we have very noble objectives historically in our policy, and try to, I believe, try to maintain those objectives of the individual liberties versus the centralized liberty. Actually is one of the points that, as I began to look into this issue, becomes one of the key differentiators. The United States puts together a huge industry that the Europeans, nobody can compete with Hollywood really in terms of the quality of the product and the pervasiveness of the product, the hegemony of the content. The Canadians go a long ways to try to prohibit that, right? But they have black market technologies that enable, particularly via satellite, that enable the content to come into the country. But the policy choice of whether or not you enable the centralization of resources in a group like Hollywood, which can be sustained by the link to copyright, for example, or to the extent that you enable Bill Gates or other technological industry, the telecom industry, the broadband internet infrastructure players, the cable companies, to the extent that you allow them to consolidate and hold power. These are all traded between the alternatives not doing those things, and one of the most important axes is the individual liberties versus the centralized power. And I myself, my own beliefs are that there's always a balance. You can't have too much group resource power, empowerment. You can't have too much anarchy where any individual can do anything. So let's just assume that the net societal benefit and commercially sustainable business models actually is while recognized in policy, actually is more important than the policy itself. We can have all kinds of policies, but if there's no commercially sustainable business model, then what's the point? And with broadband internet, this is a question that I bring up even more than in the Hollywood case, because broadband internet is an example where we have not had profitability in the operation of internet services. And as we go to broadband, there's a question, and I'll get into more detail about that, but that's, to me, it's one of the fundamental issues. The last point, degree of feasible sustainable competition, becomes important specifically with the telecom component of internet service provision, where historically, for decades, the belief has been that there's a single ability of a single organization. The fellow that came in from the railroad fellow that came into AT&T, I forget his name, it's in the paper. He argued in front of the United States Congress that you really need to have a monopoly, otherwise you can't afford to run a telephone company. And even today, probably the number of countries that believe that and still have that as an operating practice are greater than the number of countries that don't, while the most advanced countries have really liberalized policy and gone to the standpoint of competition is the thing, and therefore they've introduced competition, and there have been a lot of competitive local exchange carriers, many of whom have died off. And within the time that I've presented this before and now,